everyone. Welcome to the Genetic Genius Podcast. And I'm so thrilled to have my guest today, Jonathan DePotter. We're going to be talking all about plant medicine and specifically psychedelic plant medicine. So yay for that. It's one of my favorite subjects.
Thank you, Dr. Lulu. It's really great to be here and very much looking forward to this conversation together.
Yay, me too. So before we dive in, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the listeners, just tell a little bit about your background story, how you got to be in this particular time where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share. So I guess, to be honest, I think I'm a bit of an unlikely candidate in terms of doing what I do now, which is to facilitate really great experiences in this space, because I went very much in the other direction early in life. So despite being from pretty hippie, open-minded parents, I went down the corporate route. You could not have convinced me about anything related to spirituality when I was younger, and indeed throughout most of my corporate career. And, quite early, I went into strategy and management consulting. And so that's where I spent the vast bulk of my professional years, if they may be described as such. And I guess it was after about 5 years in Hong Kong, working for a well-known consulting firm, I just reached a stage where the next client, the next deal, the next thing just wasn't going to give me any take a year off. And I wound up finding my way to an ayahuasca retreat, a first ayahuasca retreat in Peru with a few friends of mine. So that was the beginning, a new stage, a new phase in my life, really. It opened the door to spirituality, and just about everything has changed since then. And it's been a very humbling and also very rewarding journey to continue the path of self-discovery, align with purpose, and just feel a lot better each and every day.
Love it. I love it. So when you cut out just a little bit, what year did you say that was when you first did your ayahuasca experience?
Yeah, that was about 5 years ago now in 2017.
Wow, time flies. I'm like, I can't believe we're in 2022. Sometimes I'm like, oh, really? Are we in that? Yes, we are. Okay. So let's start our conversation just in general with plant medicine, and what specific types of plants and or animal are used in psychedelics. And I'd love for you to just let's set some groundwork or ground for the listeners, so that, because some people don't even understand what that really means, including myself. There's a lot of different aspects. So it'll be learning and education for myself as well.
Yeah, sure. And there's a few interesting dynamics that I think you'll appreciate in relation to these psychedelics and these plant medicines. So generally speaking, when we are talking about psychedelics or plant medicine, we're referring to these groups of substances, these plants, these medicines that have a neurogenetic effect and a hallucinatory effect, if we may use that word. And they are reconnecting parts of our mind, body, heart, and spirit back together, unifying those to a single vibration, which is how these things should be operating. And we're typically referring to, when we speak about psychedelics, it could be magic mushrooms or psilocybin, as it's commonly referred to, ayahuasca, which is a medicine that we quite commonly work with, which is more of a Central and South American medicine, combination of two plants. Confusingly, one of them is called ayahuasca, the other one is called chacruna. And then the other medicines that are common are the San Pedro cactus, the peyote cactus. We don't do so much work with those two. You often hear about LSD, which is actually the synthetic version of ergot root, but it's not a plant strictly speaking, but it is, of course, a psychedelic. And then often you will hear also more these days about what's described as 5-MeO-DMT, which is also known as the God molecule, very powerful. And that can come in the form of a synthetic, it can come in the form of a plant, and it can also come, as you alluded to, in the form of the toad or bufo, which is, South Colorado river toad, Sonoran desert toad. And so, there's kind of that is really just scratching the surface, if we're to be honest, in terms of the set of psychedelics and psychedelic medicines. There's a much broader set of plants that are out there. Iboga is another one that's commonly used, which is more common for addiction, but it's also got other uses as well. And then what we also see in the kind of the marketplace, the ecosystem, the industry, if we may describe it as such, is that MDMA and ketamine are often being rebranded as psychedelic by companies who have ambitions to go to market sooner than later. Obviously, ketamine is already legal, and so it allows companies who are eager to move into the space to use that word, even though, strictly speaking, ketamine is a dissociative and MDMA is an empathogen. So those are kind of two different categories of things that can still have benefit when they're used therapeutically, not strictly speaking psychedelic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And I really like that you talked about ones that are in different parts of the world and that they've been used for many years, way back in time, for not only for healing from that physical perspective, but that emotional and spiritual perspective as well.
Yeah. And I think it's been interesting to work with clients because obviously we all get into these things for our own reasons. And I think it's super important that people spend the time and the energy to really connect with their own individual motivations. Because as you said, it could be spiritual in nature in terms of the motivation. It could be growth, creativity, expansion, or it could be trying to deal with a real problem, right? Some very specific healing, whether that's anxiety or depression or perhaps even addictive disorders. And so regardless, or perhaps getting clarity of purpose, all of these sorts of things are relevant reasons. And there's a lot of positive momentum, shall we say, around this space. And because these are such powerful experiences and potentially very challenging experiences, I think the most important thing for anyone who might be thinking about exploring such an experience is that they really spend the time and the energy to research the different medicines, what's out there, the different breadths of experiences that are possible, and then through that journey connect with their own very deep sense of why that doesn't orient around, oh, two of my friends did this and they had a really great time and I want to try. And it's, yeah, hear that, but make sure that you really know why you're doing this for yourself.
So it sounds like connecting into seeing what your purpose is around wanting to shift in using plant medicine psychedelics, and which is really important to know that you could have a change happen in your being and why you want that to happen.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think it's common for people to underestimate the power and the potential challenges of these experiences. Most of us have faced quite severe childhood trauma, whether we know it or not. And these are the things that as parts of our memory are reconnected and we're able to gain access to parts of our consciousness that were perhaps compartmentalized away, it can raise very deep emotions. And so what I often say to people is yeah, again, just don't underestimate these experiences, and to make sure that a lot of what we do for our clients is making sure that they come into these experiences prepared so that they have the tools to work with as emotions and experiences become amplified, so that they're able to expand into the experience and release out the lower level emotions. Because all of us have many layers of shame, guilt, fear, grief, apathy, anger, envy. All of these are lower level energies that are stuck in our vibrational field. Right. And, we can work on ourselves a lot and really improve our state of well-being, and then still be surprised by some of these lower level energies that, are still stuck down there. And so it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, what you said, I love that part about that trauma piece and being aware that is going to come up. And that can, a lot of times when I'm working with patients, whatever it is or working on, the emotional piece has to be addressed in order for the entire being to be able to shift forward into a place of healing. You can't address one part without addressing the whole.
Absolutely. And we work with a lot of quite successful people, which is a blessing because we can help people who have, much bigger impact, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, a lot of those people are those who don't want to look at the trauma. They just want to be better, but they don't want to go look down at that stuff, because often it's the most driven people that are the most traumatized. They've been emotionally disconnected from their inner world. And so they're seeking the validation from the external world. And I don't know if you've seen the film, The Wisdom of Trauma. I think Dr. Gabor Mate does a great job of describing some of the dynamics in relation to that. And so often it's that incessant seeking for that external validation that over time has driven some people into a much higher degree of, shall we say, outer world success. Right. But it's come at the expense of what's going on in their inner world. Often there's a lot to unpack there for those high performers.
Yeah, that's so true. And especially you mentioned earlier that addiction piece. And I think that can be that seeking for something in the outer world to help the inner world seem like it's at peace, or seem like there's that piece of joy, that higher emotions that you were talking about earlier. And I think using plants, and we're talking about here that plant and the psychedelic piece, but plant medicine in general, I think people are just learning how powerful it is and how much of a shift it can make when we use it for the right purpose, tune it into what your body really needs. And there's so many different plants around the world, and they've been around, they're really ready to come out and help us for sure.
Absolutely. And I think a large part of probably what you help clients with is overlaps with a lot of what we help clients with, which is, a large part of it, I believe, to be around developing sensitivity and setting up the body to be more sensitive, right? Because by virtue of the trauma that we spoke about before, by virtue of the societal programming, the food that we're eating, some of the things that we're exposing us to, a lot of us are just numbing ourselves with what it is that we're doing to ourselves each day. We're stressing ourselves out through too many hours at work, and that's been normalized to a great degree and turned into an addiction for many. It certainly was. It was a great coping mechanism because
right, exactly. Work.
Yeah. It works until it doesn't.
Then you're like, okay, this isn't working anymore.
As we attune ourselves to our own systems, and then also the whole, right? The system of the universe and nature, and begin to release the illusion of the separate self, the egoic small self, so that we can become the expanded higher self. Right. That's where these medicines play such a role, because it's not that I often say, look at any psychedelic community or group of people who do a lot of psychedelics. It's not necessarily a reflection of the type of energy that you or I might aspire to. It's got a little bit of a different energy to it. And so it's not that psychedelics in of themselves are necessarily positive. It's a neutral tool that the intentionality informs the degree to which people are able to get what it is that they're looking for from these experiences. And when we come with that right intentionality, the right tool set, it's amazing that these tools can just show us so much further down the path, really raise us into a higher vibrational state, so that we are able to really see the light or see the darkness, so that we can see the light. And then by virtue of having these experiences and these amazing downloads that are available, then we can begin to anchor these experiences back in the third dimension here and make the baby steps towards these higher states of consciousness, which are absolutely possible. And so it just makes it easier. It makes it so much easier for us, because we've got the biomarker or the memory, if you will, of what that state looks like through the medicine.
When you use, say it's your first time using some type of plant psychedelic, does it create a blueprint over the DNA, the genetic blueprint, so to speak? And so that way, the next time that you are able to access that, say you use the same plant medicine again, is it easier for you to get into that next state of higher level consciousness?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that from my own experience and what we've seen with clients, consciousness is really about your range of access. And I think there's actually now, and I'm happy to share it with you after our chat here, there's actually the first hard science to demonstrate the epigenetic benefits of psychedelic plant medicine. So that's very exciting. And I think that will yield a lot of fruit. A lot of the mentorship and guidance that I've received from the private healers that I work with is predominantly around DNA activation. And we all have superpowers, genuinely speaking. Right? It's something that I would have laughed at 5 years ago, being an atheist and having a deterministic worldview, and it's all chaos and evolution fighting for itself. And now I see things entirely from the opposite perspective.
Right.
And by tapping into each of our unique gifts, that requires new things to be activated within the physical body. And so I absolutely do believe that, once we have that blueprint, then it's much easier to access these states. Now, that being said, the correlation between these medicines and sustaining an elevated state of consciousness is not nearly as strong as we might naturally hope for or expect.
Right.
And you can see evidence of that by virtue of the litany of abuse stories that are out there in the wild. You can see that evidence through the communities that I spoke about before. So it really, unless you're doing the mental and the emotional work and you're being guided by someone who's operating from a higher vibration, just taking a whole bunch of medicine or a whole bunch of psychedelics and trying to lead yourself into these higher states is possible. If you look at a Terence McKenna or something like that, you can see, or an Alan Watts, you can definitely see that, like, okay, these people were like really able to do this by taking a whole bunch of drugs, for lack of a better description. But it's it's clear that they were the exceptions to the rule.
Not sustainable either, right?
Is a lot of the mental and the emotional work that we do around these experiences.
And I love that. And the word that you used earlier too is the intention. And I think any type of work we're doing when it comes to plant medicine, that's all about intention. What is our intention when using the plant? what is our intention when we are having the relationship with a plant? Because I think that's what I love about establishing with my patients in general, especially if they've never even used plant medicine. Okay, here's what the plant might look like. Establish a relationship. What would you like to receive from that plant? Because they're working with our cells in a specific way.
Beautifully said. I love that. And it's so true, because each of these plants has a spirit. For
Exactly.
every ailment, I truly believe that for every ailment that exists on the planet, there's a corresponding plant that can heal that ailment and continue to develop that understanding. It's all the ancient wisdom. All the ancient wisdom understood these things and had the right energetic mechanisms to be able to tap into the spirits of the plants, and to be able to understand what was required for what circumstances. And all of that wisdom and all of that knowledge has been retained in some places, and it's coming back in others.
Igniting it. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Awareness and helping the plants to be grown in places where they haven't even been grown before. I think that's one of the things I love about the farm that I work at, is I can help bring plants in there. Woohoo, I'm ready. I haven't been growing in this area. Now I can help activate some of that energy in this specific zone and help people to learn. I'd love for us to shift our conversation to talk about the brain and the nervous system a little bit, and how you plant medicine, specifically psychedelics, can help the body, the brain, that nervous system to shift, to help us to access that. I feel like we're only like a little tapping into the brain. We have so much brain that we have this capacity up here, this massive unit that we're only tapping into a little bit. And how do plants then help us to ignite that brain power, help us to tap into using our brain for whatever we want to use it for, whether that's, I don't know, writing a paper, or helping to connect with our spiritual power, or longevity.
Cool. Yeah, you dropped out there for a half a second, but I think I caught the bulk of that. What I loved on this one, what I love to start with is just to share a few stats, because the National Science Foundation has done some incredible work in relation to what's going on in the typical brain, and the stats are just mind-boggling. So your typical person has between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Pretty much 100% of those thoughts are egoic thoughts. So they're I, me, my. The science has shown that 95% of those thoughts are repetitive, and 85% of those thoughts are negative. So we think a lot, only about ourselves, the same things, and mostly bad things.
I don't do that. I'm totally on the norm there.
That's a good thing. Amazing. What's interesting about that, though, is that most people don't identify with that to a large degree, which doesn't mean that this is the case for you, of course, but there's a lot of people who aren't even conscious of their own repetitive negative self-talk patterns, because they're just so ingrained that they can't even see them. They just think of that as themselves. The other dynamic here that's important is that we come to identify ourselves as our minds. And obviously we're these infinite, expanded, limitless souls. But going for someone like me, who was very mind identified through the majority of my life, towards this difference in understanding of what and who we are, is a big shift, because through that process, the mind is returned to the right place in the hierarchy of self. So before it was at the top of the hierarchy, now it's just in the hierarchy with spirit as the apex. And so through that process, we can really stop all thoughts and move in and begin to deactivate what's known as the default mode network. Now, the default mode network in the brain is, to come back to your question, it's the piece that does a lot of command and control across the other networks of the brain. And it also is the thing that keeps us moving into the past, which is depression to a large degree, and rumination, and all of those sorts of places and times that aren't now. And equally, it's when we move into the future and we're anxious about what's coming. And that's also, so in both of those cases, we're being robbed of the present moment, which is obviously not so great, because everything is always happening now. And I think Eckhart Tolle does amazing work with his Power of Now, and I recommend that to absolutely everyone. But in both of those cases, we're being robbed of the present moment. And so, but one of the things that these medicines does is that it turns off the default mode network. And so that allows two things. It allows us to feel what it's like when we have this network turned off, which is, it's almost relieving your ear pressure after a long flight. It's just, oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that I had like a blocked mind my entire life, basically. And so once we've been shown how to flex that muscle, that network in the brain, then we can begin, our meditation practice takes on a whole different meaning, and we can really begin to manage the monkey mind and, again, use it as a tool. What's the saying? It's like the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. So we can begin to make the mind the servant for one, finally.
Yes.
And then the other aspect is decompartmentalization. So the example that I sometimes like to give is if you've got a man who says he loves his wife and he's cheating on his wife, then that's incoherence within the single organism, right? Within the it's just that should not be within a cohesive. And so a lot of the things that come to the surface when we have these experiences are these can't compute sort of situations where there's things over here that are out of tune with things over there within the same brain. And so there's a lot of resolution and a lot of clarity and a lot of direction that becomes pretty self-evident. And along with that, a lot of the more healing opportunities that have come through our lifespan.
Yeah. And I think that piece you were talking about earlier, that trauma like pattern and tape loop, I think that goes hands along or alongside what you were talking about with the brain doesn't compute. It's like you have this tape loop that you're in, and maybe that's that piece of trauma, whether you recognize it or don't recognize it. And the brain is, wait, I want to be here, but you're doing this. And then how do we shift out of that? And so it sounds like the plant psychedelics and plant medicine in general can help to shift out of that specific computing. I don't think that came out right. Into different understanding within the brain.
Absolutely. And then a large part of this is also, as we progress through this work, is to try to bring ourselves into a single vibration at all points in time. And in particular, I think there's a lot more good information out there these days around the importance of the mind and the gut connection, and also the mind and the heart connection. And so when these signals are blocked from the gut and from the heart up to the mind, it really affects us in a lot of different ways. And so, through that harmonization, we can really tap into our intuition in a much deeper way. And we, over time, begin to just be in much more loving states of existence and feel a lot more peace on the inside, which just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. When we can live from that place of peace and calm, it changes every moment we live in. And you mentioned a little bit about vibration. So let's shift and talk about vibration. So how does, of course, I love to talk about and genetics, and how does when we use plant medicine, specifically psychedelic plant medicine, how does it shift our DNA? How does it change that cellular vibration into a way that shifts us? You can talk about maybe both the physical, we talked about that a little bit, but also that spiritual piece, like really shifting us into our future self, connecting with our higher self.
Yeah. So, exactly how it works to me is mystery. And
which is good.
The more that I think that I might begin to have a smidgen of understanding of what is the less that I actually do. Like, the mystery is genuinely infinite. Right. What I will start by saying is the primary determinant of whether or not people really benefit from this work, this is of course self-reported, is whether or not they have a mystical experience, right? So that's when they transcend the mind and the physical body and move up into mystical states of consciousness. And there are common experiences with that, right? So often the first that people have is this feeling of universal love. And that is what just dwarfs all rationality, all reason, all discussion, all differences, all debate. All of that stuff feels hilariously small and silly and misguided. And even like science and rationality to some degree just feels, oh my God, it's all very cute, but like relative to the power and the profundity of love, it just doesn't even come close. Right. And then you hear things like the interconnectivity of all things, when we have this experience where all things are truly interconnected. And again, it's all energy and it's all interconnected. Quantum entanglement, right? Right. And so the quantum physics is proving a lot of these quote unquote spiritual truths that have been understood by the sages and the mystics and the priests for thousands of years. And so a lot of that's coming back now, and it's converging in a sense, which is exciting. Exactly. And then as we progress, people have experiences in relation to God consciousness, or there's many quote unquote enlightening experiences around the nature of matter, the nature
Mm.
of the universe and the innerverse, and the relationship between the two. And so a lot of these experiences, it's always irreducible to natural language. But as our understanding of ourselves, the inner world, improves, then by extension, the understanding of the outer world and the interaction with the outer world and the degree of it to the outer world, because the outer world's constantly sending us the next thing we need to see. That's
Right.
what the universe is. It's just constantly barraging us with little messages, little hints, little opportunities to test us, to see whether we meet that opportunity, whether we meet that challenge with the thing that the universe was in that moment, and we miss it. And so then we get to have that same lesson at some point again in the future. And that's just the endless process. There's no finishing point to that in terms of degree of attunement. So again, to try to link this back to, in some way, shape, or form, to DNA activation, I've felt it on multiple occasions when it's happened, either visually or experientially. I
Right.
have no idea how it's actually happening.
I love that. That's a great answer, because I think it's mystical, it's mysterious, it's part of, and I think that's a lot of how kind of that the spiritual aspect of plants and our body and the universe around us. It is that mystical aspect, and we feel it through the emotional level. I think first, like you were talking about, we feel it there, and then maybe we don't always connect with the physical piece, because we can't feel our DNA shifting. Maybe we can. It just depends on the person. But I think also that mystical aspect of it makes it. I love that part of it. Like, I think for me, there's a joy about it. Oh, I love that plants are a little mysterious and they have so many aspects and they can help us in so many different ways. Because, it's not black and white. We don't grow through black and white. We grow through a multiple rainbow of colors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so beautifully said. And the rainbow is trying to live. And that's the thing, is for the first part of my life, I was so busy running around trying to live life. And through that process, not allowing life to live through me. And there is this singular force in the universe that is trying to live through everything. And it's perfect in the way that it is, even if it's hard to see at times, and hard to feel at times. But that force is ever present and vibrating and trying to find its way through us so that it can give its full expression through us. And we all have gifts to give. And I think part of the transition and journey that we're on together is out of the space of, ooh, what can I get? What can I get? And into actually everything. We're collectively abundant. Everything is a reflection of consciousness. And I am here to give something very specifically. And so I think we're just reaching a point now where platforms such as this and technology, we're reaching a very exciting point in our collective evolution where technology can begin to work for us a little bit. And more people can spend their time and energy helping others to improve themselves. And so I think that's just such an exciting inflection point in terms of human potential and the amount that's still to be unlocked. Thousands of people resigning from all of the big tech companies and all of the big banks, because these are just environments that don't allow the full expression of consciousness at the point of consciousness, because there's just limitations and constraints and expectations that don't match the dreams, the hopes, the love of the individual.
That's right, of the planet. Totally. And when we're thinking about, so we've been talking a lot about the individual evolution, this like shift that we can have. And so I think you were just saying that when we work together as a collective, then we can evolve for that consciousness piece. How does plant medicine help us to do that? How does, when instead of having individual, when we align with, we can shift it as we talk more about the retreats too. I think maybe that would be a good place to, maybe we can talk about that now. Let's say, so if you can talk a little bit about the retreats and how that you lead, helping people using specific psychedelic plant medicine and other forms, how, when you have this small group, how does that then elevate them together for healing and then like multiply throughout the web of healing on the planet?
Yeah, sure. I like to bring this one back to vibration, right? Yeah. So we're all oscillating at a vibration. What we're looking for in quality healers and quality experiences is that they're led and facilitated by someone who's operating from a high vibration. In physics, when there's a lower frequency and a higher frequency, the lower frequency harmonizes up to the higher frequency.
Exactly.
And that's what's happening. that's what's happening collectively, that we're raising in our vibration. And often these days we have so much shifting. There's so much volatility and uncertainty and complexity in our world that people get to a stage where they just know that there's some vibrational problem that they have that requires resolution, and they don't articulate it perhaps this way, but it is felt, right? There's a symptom of that, and it's all the things that we spoke about before. And so that's really where these medicines come in, is that they are helping us to harmonize our vibration. They are bringing to the surface the things that orient us in fear. And so working a job that you don't love is a symptom of, and there are so many symptoms of fear, right? Whether we talk about the addiction, the depression, the anxiety, all of this stuff is all a symptom of fear. And so as these powerful traumas and past memories and experiences come to the surface to be processed and ultimately released, we're dropping the fear. And then as we drop the fear, we connect with the love, the peace, the purpose, the joy. Right. These are the things that life really wants to show us. You know, sometimes there's a lot of darkness to be able to release before we can get to that. But it's always time well spent. One of our clients, he came back 3 weeks later for a second retreat, but he messaged me after the first retreat and he says, I've cleared 50 years worth of shit in 10 days. And before, he was a tech executive running 3 companies and and doing so much and so stressed out, and his back was off, and like he was just constantly uncomfortable. So he was able to get rid of 2 of the jobs. He bought a big sailboat in Hawaii, started working the third job, doing it only remotely. He was fixing up the sailboat, and I was just like, wow, he's living the life, you know?
Living the life.
Doing the things that he enjoy now, as opposed to trying to chase down the next $1 million, which is just not going to bring it.
No. And I think that you hit on that collective piece, because when as an individual, we can tap into our own individual joy, that peace, that love you're talking about, it goes out through ourselves, out through our vibration you were talking about. Yeah. So it helps, it's a wave that goes out into those around us, and just being in our presence or being in that person's presence then can change our own individual vibration.
Absolutely. And I think Ram Dass has an amazing quote that's perfect in relation to that, which is, I can do nothing for you but work on myself, and you can do nothing for me but work on yourself.
That's right.
That's so true, right? Like we can never change anyone as much as we might like. It has to come from within. And equally, all of the problems that we face collectively and individually in the outside world is just a reflection of problems that we face in the inside world. And I think finally we've reached an inflection point where enough wealthy people who are busy chasing gold coins for the last many decades have reached a stage, and Corona certainly has had spiritual significance in terms of helping us accelerate that recognition process and saying, hey, maybe there's something else here that I've been missing, and maybe I should start to look this way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people have had a shift over the past couple of years, and continuing as we're still feeling all the different effects of it and living it. We're going to hopefully continue, and I know we are, continue to see more evolution and change as we move forward. I'd love for us to step back for a moment and revisit the trauma piece, because I think that's an important piece that I'd love for us to dive a little bit deeper into, so to speak. So how do plant medicines help us to, let's say someone has a trauma that they are aware of, but maybe don't know how to shift through it. Maybe they had something traumatic. How do plant medicines then help us to meet that trauma in a safe and protective way, and then help us to break through that trauma pattern that's really holding us back?
Yeah. So a lot of what we do for our clients in the preparation stage before we bring them on retreat is related to, where are you now and where do you want to be? And so I believe that any one of us can become whomever it is that we want to be, right? It's all intentionality. The whole universe is intentionality. It's just intention expanding itself endlessly in all directions for the sake of experiencing itself in its various permutations. But whatever intention people have is foremost. And then with that intention, we can begin to say, okay, you're not that person today. So let's start to work on surfacing the limiting beliefs and the limiting thoughts and the patterns of behavior that might be, and perhaps even the emotional reactivity that you're facing in some of your daily life that
Mhm.
is keeping you from being that person that you know that you can be, because you can be that person.
Right.
And people genuinely have that, yes, I can be that person. If they're in much lower states of consciousness, in the kind of victim mentality, we're not the best fit for those clients. Those people deserve help as well, but if they really see that the world is coming against them, that we're just not.
No,
We're just
not a
not
good, not a good fit.
yeah, so we send them to other places that are,
Yeah.
but if they feel that intentionality, then one of the major steps is, yes, number one, surfacing all of those limiting aspects, and
Mhm.
number two, making sure that they're really connected with their emotional self. And so a lot of busy, stressed out people are so disconnected from their emotional system, they don't even know it.
Right.
And
They're living
so
in the stress person.
100%.
Yeah.
And so helping them reconnect with their emotions pre-medicine is so important, because often these people haven't really felt emotions in their physical body in quite some time. And so just to
Right.
amplify the trauma, the childhood trauma, for example, without any sort of emotional preparation, can actually re-traumatize
Right.
just as easily as be a healing experience. And so when we come into that with already an understanding of feeling into our emotions and releasing, then what I always say is, it's not how much medicine you do, right? Some people, oh yeah, I've done 100 ceremonies. You're like, oh boy,
Right.
now you really need help. And so it's about how much progress we make on with the ceremonies, with the
Right.
tools, how well
Yeah.
we integrate that back into everyday life. So that's a large part of how we help people prepare.
Mhm.
And then again, I'll speak in vibrational terms. So what the medicine is doing is harmonizing mind, body, heart, and spirit. And it's trying to bring us up into a higher vibrational state. That's really
Right.
what the medicine is doing. And as it's trying to do that, then consciousness exists in polarity. So anything that's keeping us from hitting that higher vibrational state is going to be coming from the other polarity. So sometimes we need to travel down into these lower states of consciousness, which is where all
Right.
the darkness and all the sickness. I know we'd all like to be up there with the angels and with
Right.
retractable wings and flying around with our loved ones, just
Right.
exploring the universe. But doesn't always work out that way.
We have to be in
Sometimes
our bodies
down
some
there.
part of the time.
Yeah, you got to get out there and do the dirty work sometimes and clear out the cobwebs. So
Yeah.
it's and there's such a broad variety of experiences that can take place, because consciousness is truly infinite.
Yeah.
And we can find ourselves in some scary places. And so it's important to be mentally and emotionally prepared for that, and also to be well facilitated and well guided, particularly on the spiritual plane, because the healers that do this work well, they're not just sticking you in a corner and letting you find your own way. They can see where you're traveling, and I don't want to say control the energetic space, but they can calibrate the energetic space so that you are having a journey which is in alignment with what you can handle, say, for a first experience.
Right.
And that's very important.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you for that great explanation. And I don't know if this is a question you can even answer, but do you see a specific age group of usual trauma? I don't know, 4 to 6 or 8 to 10, teenage. Do you see some specific realm of time usually that people have, put in their trauma box?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think most of what I have seen is younger than people would think. A lot of big traumas between 3, 4, and 5, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the examples that I sometimes give, because it's so innocuous, is because most people think, oh, not me, I'm good. So this is the example I like to give. You've just come into the house, you're carrying some groceries in for mom, you're 5 years old, and mom's just had a long, bad day. She's been working all day, she's tired, and it's raining out, and blah, 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 and traffic, and you were a mess in the supermarket. And so anyway, so you come in and you're carrying groceries and you drop some groceries. And in that moment, mom loses her patience and she goes, oh, you never get anything. Just get out of the way. Right. Now, that can really anchor itself in the subconscious of a child. When we're adults, we let things go. We're able to discern what takes hold in our subconscious and what doesn't.
Right.
As a 5-year-old, you're not able to do that. And you imagine that 5-year-old is at school the next day playing with friends. And in that moment, she or he gets the ball. And in that moment, the tape plays back. Oh, you never get anything. Just get out of the way.
Right.
All of a sudden, we've established a pattern. Now, imagine the difference in the trajectory of that child's life by virtue of this tape playing back. You never get anything. Just get out of the way. You never get anything right. Just get out of the way. And so this is the most minor infraction that we could imagine in terms of trauma. But things like this can and do arise, and people understand. Often we've got these unexplainable character traits, right? Maybe we're quick to anger, frustration, we're always timid, all of these things that limit us from our full and true expression and potential, but we don't know where it's coming from. And
Mhm.
so often these medicines unlock so that we can understand and we can release all of the
Mm.
energies and all of the judgment and all of the shame and all of the guilt that's associated with these past.
That's a great explanation. And I really like what you said too about unlocking, because I feel like that is a huge piece of how plant medicine works. Is it helps us to unlock aspects of our physical body, emotional and spiritual body, which sometimes can be we don't connect to. And I think in that age group that you're talking about, especially, we're different in that age group. We have a different perspective. We're not quote unquote tainted by the world yet. We're more open. And then when we are shut down, it can have an impact and create that specific implant, so to speak, in our psyche. And I work a lot with patients with trauma. That's a big part of what I do. And I see that age group. So I was like, I wonder if he's going to say that age group. I see that a lot. And a lot of times people don't remember, including myself. You just block that out because you don't know that age is also hard to remember, like too. I mean, it's not like yesterday where we can just turn it on. And that's what plant medicine is so great for that. It helps us to be in this safe environment to then travel back or forwards into a place where we're able to connect in a different way. I love that. Thank you. Great explanation.
The other thing that I wanted to share just quickly in relation to this is that as people get older, it actually takes more energy to keep the trauma down because it's the same patterns that are surfacing over and over again. It becomes, as we repeat the same mistakes and encounter the same things, it just becomes more painful. And so it actually, over time, it takes more and more energy to keep that stuff down. And I don't know what your clients are like, but you will see people basically take two approaches. One is to turn around and to face the problem and to begin to take steps, whether that's meditation or plant medicine or any other paths, yoga. There's many paths.
Nutrition,
nutrition,
just
exercise,
right?
Holistic healing, right? There's so many modalities out there these days. Or they go completely manic. So they try to fill their life with as many things as possible to avoid having to face themselves. I've got some of my old mentors are like cycling 100 kilometers a day and they sit on 20 boards, and I'm like, just let me know when you're ready,
Right. When you're ready, just call me.
They're so busy, and I'm like, I know that's the problem.
Yeah, totally. It's so true. And I see both of those. And I also see, I think the third one is where someone is then perpetuating their illness into the next layer. It's like they're suppressing, and then it's another thing just adds on to that layer. So it's then, like multiplies. And so that's where the like autoimmune disease develops or Crohn's disease or cancer. It's because they're never addressing the real root cause of why things began in the first place.
100%. It's interesting that you say that, because certainly there's a growing belief in the plant medicine community broadly, and I would say specifically with the most advanced healers that we have on our team, is that it's all trauma.
Exactly.
All of it is disease, all of it's all mind oriented, and then it manifests through the physical body
in the way that it can, whether that's from like maybe something happened to you in that traumatic experience where you held it in, like maybe it was now you have a lung disease, or you're like that breath, like you're just holding your breath. I can't breathe because if I breathe, I'm not gonna be able to face reality. Or you have this rapid heart rate because you're like, every time I feel afraid, and I'm like, everything just goes crazy in the body. So yeah, totally. I feel the same. I understand that completely. And I work with patients from that mindset, because that's the way we really can help people shift when they realize that trauma is a piece of the puzzle.
And what a puzzle, right? What a puzzle the human condition is, and the human experience. We're born into ignorance. We're just born like pretty useless, actually. And then we just gotta bounce off everything and try and make sense of this frame of reality. And then there's just so many ways to expand our understanding. It's really the greatest mystery and miracle. It's incredible.
That's right. Finding our purpose through plant medicine is a wonderful place to be and experience. And how does, when we're working with a plant medicine, does it help us to open up the other kingdom, so to speak, like animal medicine and stone and crystal medicine? Does it help us to open into those other realms, which I think are also so important for healing? But my question really is, how does plant medicine help to unlock that door door to the other aspects of those pieces of the puzzle, those like animals and minerals that are sometimes harder to relate to. I think people can understand plants a little better because you're like, oh, okay, I eat broccoli, right? It's like you at least can understand that. But when it comes like, well, how can I connect to this animal spirit, this animal medicine? It seems like so far removed and unrelatable, maybe.
Yeah, I think, a large part of it is helping people tap into their sensitivity and also to be motivated to be students of energy, students of consciousness. And I always encourage our clients, particularly those that we support from we do a lot of private work where we just go with one client and go really deep for a week. And I really encourage people to think whenever they're looking at things or experiencing things, to look at the energy of the. So you're looking at a bag of Doritos, you're like, what's the energy here, right?
No energy, zero.
Yeah, zero energy, yeah.
Zero.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Lulu not endorsing Doritos anytime soon. Whereas you look at an aloe vera plant and you're just like, wow, look at this thing. It's just, it's a mathematical miracle. Look at how this thing grows. It's magical. And so just looking at all things through the lens of energy, I think is something that has infinite potential. Some of the, and now I'm going to sound really crazy, and some of the healers that we work with, that's how they see. They can see how clouds are going to change over the next few minutes. And they will consistently because that is how they actually see. These are the sorts of capacities and skills that all of us have. It's just whether or not we've been able to unlock them as such. And coming back to your question, there are some people who immediately develop such a strong instinct and sensitivity in relation to how energy between one thing and another thing can be exchanged for the benefit of one or both things. Because ultimately it's all one organism, and energy is just trying to exchange itself for the benefit of other things within the broader ecosystem. Whether we're talking about crystals or plants or animals, they're always trying to provide signals to the ecosystem so that there can enter a state of symbiosis, but also.
Oh, so true. I love that answer. And I think it is it's just an energetic form. Like you said, it's just vibration. If we can just tune into it, connect into it with ourselves first, and then all the other things that are available for us to connect with.
Like one of our healers, for example, when we go for lunch, he will literally drag his finger down the menu and wait until he gets a positive intuitive response in his physical body. And then he'll look down and he'll order that thing because it's given him a positive response. That's what his body wants.
Exactly. And that's a great way for people to think about food, the relationship with food and everything they're doing and putting into their body. Oh, do I really want this? Do I really need this? How's it going to change? Do I need that bag of Doritos? Maybe in that moment that was like, you needed it, but maybe it wasn't going to have the final result that you needed.
You gotta go find that trauma later, which led you to eat the bag of Doritos.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Jonathan, I think we could talk for a long time, I'm sure, but I want to wrap up with things today with a couple key points. So one, I have one more final question, but I'd also like for you to explain how people can find you, learn about the retreats, find out more information, follow you, social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So you can find us on behold-retreats.com or on Instagram at behold_retreats. And we're a little different than most of the outfits there. We require human conversation. I'd like to chat with all of our clients, make sure that we're a good fit for where you're at in life and what you're looking to achieve. And equally, we like to give you the opportunity to sniff us out a little better and ask difficult questions so that you can be confident that you're making a good decision, because that's really the most important thing.
Wow, great. I love it. So that's behold-retreats.com. And then we'll have all that in the show notes so people can find you and learn more about the retreats, including myself. I'm stoked. One last question, Jonathan. If you had an unlimited budget, what would you do right now to make the biggest impact on the health and welfare of the planet?
10-day silent meditation retreat, everyone.
Nice. I love it. I love silent meditations. I used to live at a yoga retreat center, and that was always the best when you're like in total silence and everyone around you is like in their own world. And you're like, no, I'm just tuning out so I can tune in.
100%.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks again for joining us today. It was a joy to have you on the show, and I loved our conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me, Dr. Lulu. It's been a real pleasure.
You're so welcome.